She sat quietly at her small desk, eyes fixed on the screen, fingers tapping softly on the keyboard. The office around her was noisy with chatter, ringing phones, and the hum of the air conditioner. But her mind was far away, somewhere she liked better, on a stage under a spotlight, speaking words that meant something. Her days were filled with numbers and data. She worked as a clerk in a small company, a job that paid the bills but did little to feed her soul. Every morning she arrived early, made herself a cup of coffee, and settled in to do her work without complaints. She was good at her job, quiet, polite, and mostly invisible to others. That suited her just fine, but inside she had a secret. When the office was empty and the lights dimmed, she would close the door, take out a small notebook from her bag, and read aloud. Her voice was soft, but she filled the room with stories and poems she had written, words that told of dreams, fears, and moments of courage she hoped to find one day. Since she was a little girl, she loved to perform. She didn't have many friends growing up, but when she stood in front of a mirror or a small group of family, she felt alive. The stage was her place to be free. She dreamed of telling stories that could touch people's hearts, even if it was just a few at a time. But life had not been easy. Her parents wanted her to be practical. Find a steady job, they said. Forget those silly ideas. So she did what was expected. She got a job, moved to a new city, and buried her dreams under piles of work. Still, the fire inside never died. After every long day, she returned to her small apartment and practiced. She recited poems, worked on stories, and imagined the applause of an audience. She hoped someday she would have the chance to share her words for real. One day, a flyer on the community board caught her eye. It was about an open mic night at a local cafe. People were invited to perform songs, poetry, or stories. The words jumped out at her like a sign. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Her heart raced as she read the details. The thought of standing in front of strangers terrified her. What if they laughed? What if her voice shook? But the chance was rare, and she wanted to try. She signed up quietly without telling anyone. Keeping it a secret felt safer. It was her decision, her moment. At work, she kept her head down. The days passed slowly, but she counted down to the event. Every spare minute, she practiced. She read her poems aloud in front of the bathroom mirror, imagining the faces in the audience. Sometimes she felt weak. The fear crept in like a shadow, whispering doubts. You're not good enough, it said. You don't belong on a stage. But she pushed those thoughts away. She had waited too long. A few coworkers noticed her quiet excitement. One day, while sipping coffee in the break room, she mentioned the open mic. Her voice was small, almost hesitant. Open mic? You're going to perform? A voice said, loud and sharp. She turned and saw a man from her office. He was known for being loud, always the center of attention, quick to mock others. His smile was not kind. You? On stage? He laughed. That's funny. Others around him chuckled quietly. The room's warmth shifted, and she felt her face flush. She looked down, wanting to disappear. She tried to explain. I just want to try. It's just for fun. But the man wasn't done. Look, nobody's taking this seriously. You're better off just sticking to your desk. His words stung more than she expected. For the first time, she doubted herself. Maybe he was right. The next days at work were different. She heard whispers when she passed by. Some coworkers exchanged looks. The confidence she had started to build felt fragile, like it could break at any moment. Still, she held on to the dream. At night, when the apartment was silent, she read her poems and practiced her voice. She reminded herself why she wanted to do this. One evening, as she rehearsed in front of the mirror, her hands trembling, she took a deep breath and said, I'm ready. The open mic night was only a week away. She walked into the office feeling a little more nervous than usual. The open mic night was getting closer, and the excitement inside her was mixed with a heavy weight of worry. She wanted to believe in herself, but every time she thought about standing in front of a crowd, her heart beat faster, and her hands trembled. That morning, she decided to keep her plans to herself. After the last conversation in the break room, she realized not everyone would understand. The office was full of people who preferred safety and routine. Dreams like hers seemed like jokes to them. Still, she could not hide the change in her. She started humming softly while working, smiling a little more, and even daydreaming during meetings. But the moment anyone asked her what was going on, she shut down and said, Nothing, just tired. One day, she overheard two coworkers whispering near the coffee machine. Their words were quiet but sharp. Did you hear? She's going to perform at that open mic thing. She? Seriously? That's going to be a disaster. They laughed quietly and she felt a prick in her chest. She tried to ignore it and kept her head down. Then came the man who had laughed at her before. He sat at his desk near hers and, loud enough for others to hear, said, "You know, I don't get why she even bothers. It's not like she can sing or talk well in front of people." She felt heat rise to her cheeks but said nothing. She wanted to respond, to say something fierce that would silence him, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she focused on her work. She told herself to be stronger, to not let him win. That afternoon, during lunch, she found a quiet spot near the window. She took out her notebook, the one filled with poems and stories no one else had seen. She opened it to a page she had been working on all week. The words she had written felt alive, like they were waiting to be spoken aloud. As she read, she felt the fear begin to melt away. She remembered why she wanted to do this, to share her voice, to show herself that she could be more than what others expected. But the doubts kept coming back. What if she froze on stage? What if people laughed? What if she failed? She closed the notebook and put it away. She wished for a sign, some proof that she could do this. Later that day, as she walked home, she noticed a woman sitting on the bench outside her apartment building. She looked old, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to hold many stories. The woman smiled and said, "You look like you carry a lot in your heart." Surprised, she sat beside her and nodded. "I used to perform on stages long ago," the woman said softly. "I know what it's like to be afraid." She looked at her carefully. "What holds you back?" She thought about telling her everything, but only said, "I'm scared I'm not good enough." The woman nodded. "That fear visits us all. But sometimes it's not about being perfect, it's about being brave enough to try." They talked for a while and the woman gave her a small notebook. "Now write your feelings here," she said. "And when you feel afraid, read your own words back to yourself." For the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. The days passed, and she met the woman often. They practiced reading poems together, and the woman gave gentle advice on how to stand tall and speak clearly. Her confidence grew slowly. She practiced every night, reading poems aloud, imagining the stage. But the office was still a place of whispers and sideways glances. One morning, the man from the office came over and said loudly, "I bet you're going to chicken out." She looked at him calmly and said, "Maybe, but at least I'm trying." That surprised him, and the office grew quiet. The night before the open mic, she sat in her apartment, the small notebook in her lap. She read the poems she had written with the woman's help, letting the words fill her with strength. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady as she spoke. She knew tomorrow would be hard, but she was ready to face it. She woke up early the next morning. The sun was soft through the curtains, but inside her a storm of nerves was brewing. Today was the day she had been both excited and scared about for weeks. The open mic night was finally here. Her small apartment felt quieter than usual. She sat at the kitchen table, her notebook open in front of her. The words she had written were waiting, like old friends encouraging her to be brave. She read them slowly, feeling her heartbeat slow a little. She remembered the kind woman from the bench who had given her courage and taught her how to believe in herself. Their meetings had become a source of strength. She wished she could see her now, to tell her she was ready. After breakfast, she got dressed carefully. She chose a simple outfit that made her feel comfortable but also strong. She stood in front of the mirror, took a deep breath, and smiled at herself. "You can do this," she whispered. The walk to the cafe was quiet, but her thoughts were loud. What would the room be like? Would people listen? Would they like her words? When she arrived, the small cafe was already filling with people. The air smelled of fresh coffee and warm pastries. She found a corner away from the crowd and sat down with her notebook. She watched as others took the stage, some singing, some telling jokes, some reading poems. The applause felt like waves rising and falling. Her turn was getting closer. She wanted to back out, to disappear into the crowd, but she remembered all the practice, all the moments of doubt she had overcome. When her name was called, her legs felt like jelly. She stood, her notebook in hand, and walked to the stage. The spotlight was bright and warm, shining down on her. The room grew silent. She opened her notebook and looked up. Faces stared back at her, some kind, some curious, some skeptical. She took a deep breath and began. Her voice was soft at first, but as she spoke, it grew stronger. The words poured out about fear, hope, and finding strength in unexpected places. She spoke of the quiet battles she fought every day, the voices that told her she was not enough, and the courage it took to say, "I am here." She felt the room lean in, caught in her story. When she finished, the silence was thick for a moment. Then the room erupted in applause. People stood, clapped, and some wiped tears from their eyes. She smiled, heart pounding with joy. Afterwards, the kind woman from the bench was there, smiling proudly. "You were wonderful," she said softly. The man from the office was also there, but he looked surprised, almost speechless. That night, she went home feeling different. The fear was still there, but smaller now, pushed aside by a new sense of pride. She knew this was only the beginning. The days after the open mic night were filled with a strange kind of magic. She woke up feeling lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her chest. People she had never spoken to before smiled at her in the office. Even the man who had doubted her seemed quieter, as if he was thinking about something new. She spent her mornings arriving early, sometimes humming a tune or quietly practicing a poem in her head. The small victories gave her hope and energy. But the real test was still ahead. The bigger stage she had been invited to by one of the cafe's regulars. A week later, she stood backstage in a larger hall, the noise of the crowd like a distant roar. The room was full of strangers, and the lights were brighter than she expected. Her heart pounded loudly in her ears. She could feel the sweat on her palms as she clutched her notebook. She thought back to the small cafe, the kind woman who believed in her, and the moment she had first stood in front of a crowd. That memory gave her a quiet strength. Her name was called, and she walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit her, and for a moment the fear tried to take over. But then she saw a few friendly faces in the crowd, nodding and smiling. That gave her courage. She opened her notebook and started to speak. Her voice was steady and clear. She told a story this time, about a woman who was told she would never shine, who faced doubts and fears but found her own light. As she spoke, her confidence grew. The words flowed smoothly, carrying the room with them. She could see some people closing their eyes, lost in the story. Some wiped away tears. When she finished, the room stayed quiet for a second, then burst into applause. The sound was louder than anything she had ever heard. She smiled, tears of joy in her eyes. After the performance, many people came up to her. Some thanked her for sharing her story. Others asked where they could see her again. The man who had mocked her at work was there too. This time he didn't laugh or make a joke. Instead, he said quietly, "You were better than I expected." She nodded, feeling proud but kind. She didn't need to say anything else. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, the applause still ringing in her ears. She realized she had changed. She was no longer the quiet clerk hiding behind a desk. She was a storyteller, a performer, someone who could inspire others. Her dreams were no longer just dreams. They were real. She never imagined that one small step would change so much. After the big performance, her life started to feel different. The words she once whispered in her small apartment were now heard by more people than she had ever dreamed. The video of her performance was shared online by someone in the audience. She saw the views climbing each day, thousands, then tens of thousands. Messages began arriving from strangers, telling her how much her words meant to them. Some said her story gave them hope. Others said they felt less alone. At work, the atmosphere changed too. People stopped whispering. They looked at her with respect. The same man who had once mocked her now avoided jokes and gave quiet nods when they crossed paths. She didn't need to say anything to prove herself anymore. Her actions had spoken loud enough. She started getting invitations to perform at local events. Cafes, schools, community centers, all places where she could share her voice. Each time she felt a little less scared and a little more powerful. One afternoon, a young girl approached her after a small show. The girl's eyes were bright and hopeful. "I want to write poems like you," she said shyly. She smiled and knelt down to her level. "You can," she said warmly. "All it takes is to believe in your own voice." They began meeting regularly. She helped the girl find words for her feelings and taught her how to speak them with courage. In the process, she found herself healing even more. Her days were still busy with work, but now they held a new meaning. She wasn't just doing a job. She was building a life that included her dreams. She found balance by waking up early to write and practice, even if it meant being tired sometimes. One evening, after a long day, she sat on her small balcony, looking at the city lights. She thought about how far she had come. The shy woman who once hid from the world was now someone who stood in front of crowds and shared her heart. She thought about the moments of doubt and fear. She realized those feelings were part of her story, not the end of it. They were reminders of the courage it took to step forward. Her phone buzzed with a message. It was from the woman who had once sat on the bench outside her building. "Proud of you," it said simply. She smiled, feeling warmth spread inside her. This journey wasn't over, but now she knew she was ready for whatever came next. Because she had learned the most important lesson of all. Confidence isn't about never being afraid. It's about facing fear and still choosing to shine.